Hello everybody and welcome to episode 3 of Fundamental Forest, this series in which we tackle the sandbox of Roller Coaster Tycoon with a more considered eye. This series is sort of targeted at newcomers to the more deliberate style of Roller Coaster Tycoon, which is less about scenario play and more about the sandbox style, which is where we let our imagination run wild. But how do we let our imagination run wild and bring to life the things that we want to bring to life? And that is advice that I feel like I am capable of giving because I have had to learn myself. So here we are, we're just looking at our entrance area here that we've achieved in the last 2 episodes. Really proud of this. I think there's still more heightening we can do, and I'm sort of inspired by this here. So perhaps as I'm talking a little bit more, I can kind of get cracking with some development here. I think we can add little splashes of colour here. And hopefully we can do this. Now we can just, there's no laws. And even if there were laws, I wouldn't listen to them. I rarely do, especially when it comes to Roller Coaster Tycoon. But yeah, a little bit of lore about this episode. This is episode 3, of course. This is being recorded before episode 1 and 2 have even been released. They are sat on my YouTube channel right now, uploaded. They're just waiting for the thumbnails. And trust me when I say it is worth the wait for these thumbnails. But the reason why I share that with you is because if we've had any conversations in the comments or anything, so really must apologize. I'm not ignoring any of the discussions that we've had on the comments, if we've had any discussions at all. It is purely the fact that I'm waiting on these thumbnails, and I've got to keep moving forward. You know, I've not got infinite time, and getting ahead of the situation is always going to be a good thing, because we can always come back and change any things that we want to change. I'm sure you guys are going to give me some remarkable and insightful advice, because you're going to be looking at it with fresh eyes, and I'm going to find that really, really helpful. But yeah, this is already looking a bit more spicy, isn't it? So it's looking a bit more focal pointy. But I wonder if we were to, I'm just thinking this looks a bit like too weighty for how short they are, so I wonder if maybe we'll leave this one and this one like that, but I think we might do the little strip of red on this one. And what this is doing is basically just injecting just a little bit of colour, and we've already got this. I have no idea why we chose maroon, but we did, and it's kind of cool. I like this maroon. It's it feels very regal, very royal. But I think there's like a weighting issue. And I'm not talking about waiting for these thumbnails to be made for me. It just seemed a bit too heavy. A bit too heavy for its place. But you'll notice that I've formally beheaded the... Without trial, I will add. Nobody got to speak for themselves in this. I've beheaded the merry-go-round. And the reason why I've done this is because I think we can use this area for it. The vision that I have for this area is a very sort of like scenic garden sort of thing with some wide open grass, and then perhaps in the middle, not as sort of like a focal point in this regard where there's lots of very blunt leading lines towards it, but like a focal point in the middle of or towards the back of this view from the entrance. Say even if we just like ended it maybe here. I think we want to push it a bit further back than that. Maybe we'll push it further back to like here, like this sort of grass area, and we could plop the merry-go-round here, like in the back, so you could see it from here. But in this area here, we could have dirt footpaths sort of like through the area like this. And my vision for that is pretty vivid. Just thinking of the places that I've been, particularly in Britain. and then having lots of like gardens and plants and all sorts of stuff around like that. That is hideous to look at. So yeah, that's my idea that I had for that. And I think what we're going to do in this episode is, because we're kind of sick to death of the entrance area, or I'm worried that we are. I could work on this loads more, by the way, so if this might be the first episode where your responses might actually not fall on deaf ears, we could absolutely come back and carry on with this and only move on when we feel like it. But the reason why I've moved I keep wanting to say microwave. That's insane. I guess a microwave also spins though, so maybe that's where the wires are getting crossed in my brain. But it's not a microwave, it's a merry-go-round. The reason why I've moved it, I hope this isn't giving it away too much, but I thought instead of doing a merry-go-round, we could do the other classic entrance feature, which is the miniature railway, the navigation around the park, because this would be a very early addition to the park. It would be very expensive to do off the top and would kind of dominate the layout of the park from that point, which I find really interesting. So it's kind of obliged to be an early installation. That is crazy. In Open Roller Coaster Tycoon, this was added ages ago, but I almost didn't consciously acknowledge that it had been added. You can build path over miniature railway, and it has this unique, specific, bespoke graphic that displays where the tracks carry on over the path, just like they do in real parks. And what's more, we're unable to demonstrate it because we don't have any peeps in the park, but peeps will stop when the train's coming by. That is amazing. So I'm really excited about that feature and I want to utilize it. So just a little like technical thing. It only works on straight track, but beggars can't be choosers. We've already got such a remarkable feature there. So what I want to do with this miniature railway station is, because we've got this dominant line that's firing straight down the middle, is what I want for the peeps to be able to do. And maybe what I'll do as well is I'll have this path rejoin around this side in sort of this sort of thing, and have a water feature in the middle that you can look out across towards the other areas, and have our castle in the middle of that feature. I think that's going to be a really, really appealing sight to behold as you come into the park, and that's sort of like the Disneyland thing, right? But there's not the Disneyland way of doing it isn't the only way of doing it. So I think we should definitely explore some different ways of doing that, maybe make it more to our taste, because Disney's already done Disney, right? And we aren't necessarily building a Disney park, so maybe we should try a different spin on it. Still hitting the same beats, but in our own unique way. And I'm looking forward to tackling the challenge that will inevitably be this castle that's going to be the weenie, or the focal point that can be seen from far away. In theme park enthusiast circles, this is referred to as a weenie. Isn't that interesting? The good thing about a weenie is that it lets you position yourself geographically in relation to it. Because it's a large dominant feature, we could be over in this side of the park, enjoying Egypt land, for example, and we'll still be able to see this feature, so we can go, oh, we're seeing this side of the castle, so we need to head this way to get back to the entrance. So the big picture here is already looking appealing, even at the beginning of episode 3. I wonder how many episodes we're going to get to. It's an exciting thought, isn't it? And now we've got these thumbnails, no one can stop us. So I thought the thing that we could do is sort of begin sketching the geographic features of the map moving forward. We've already mentioned a lake, but with this train ride that we've got here, we could plop down some stations. We could map out some of the path that we want the train to take. Now this is gonna develop endlessly. This is what we've got to understand. Everything's going to change, and that's like a really fun part of it. It's going to be constantly improving. I just thought I'd make that match there. Hello everybody. So it's the following day from when I did the last recording, and look at what we did. I did a lot yesterday, but I felt like I did a lot while saying very little. So I thought I'd do a quick summary instead. I will include this clip because it is funny. And then before you even know what has happened, we've already made, and the ducks are right at home in it. Look at that. He's changed where his bills get delivered to. Look at that. He's settled right in. What I did was I spoke about the power of planning and how having something is substantially better than nothing. Because if you have something to reflect on. We can look at this and we can say, oh, this was a huge mistake, or I want to change this part. If you don't have anything, it's just an abstract thing. But now that we've got this work we can look at and reflect on, we can make changes, we can make decisions, and that gives us a lot of power. So that's what we did philosophically, but what we did mechanically, what we actually did was we went through with like the mountain tool and we made some sketches. Now, these sketches do not have to be precise. All they have to be is informative, because we can go through and we can shape all this stuff afterwards. We want something ugly, we want something descriptive, because we're going to go through, we're going to change all of this anyway. We don't want to do too much work on it, right? We don't want it to be too good and have too much investment, because we're probably going to change it. So this rough outline is extremely powerful for getting the results that we want. And we have used this miniature railway to articulate where we're going to be wanting some of the boundaries to be. We want our stations to be in different areas, right? So we've just plopped it down incredibly simple, sort of at the orthogonal location, so northeast, southwest of this lake. And that is probably going to be the common sense places to have these, because they are sort of, we've put 4 in, they're sort of equidistant. Now it might change entirely, we might want to put more stations in, we might want to have fewer stations. There's no legal parameter that we have to fulfill regarding stations, so we're going to do whatever feels right. Something else that we've articulated using this railway is the fact that we want to continue this philosophy that we began over here, where we are using the height advantage to look down upon track as well as look up at stuff, and getting that dichotomy in place, that duality, where you've got the looking down and you've got the looking up. So whilst you're in the train, you're going to be looking up, and whilst you are off the train, you're going to be looking down on it. And that is an extremely immersive thing to do in Roller Coaster Tycoon, because it is a game where you look down at the situation. We can't contextualize ourselves within the game. We have to use our imagination for that, and that's all well and good. So all practical situations, we're going to be looking down. And if we create a powerful enough situation, we put ourselves within the game using our imagination. Mr. Richard E. Fundamental was a inventor. He invented the first self-mowing lawnmower. And that is why there is so much grass in Fundamental Forest. He cut down all the trees and... So what I'm doing here is I've gone in, done some like manual shapes and just been smoothing them out a bit for the peninsula where we could put the castle. And look at that, you're coming around here, you've entered the park, you've looked over the station for the train, and you're looking over the water to this castle over here, and it's going to help you situate yourself. Now what I could do is I could make this even taller. I think that could be fun. So let's do that. And we're just using really brutal shapes here, because this can all be refined as we go along. Here we go. We can go up another one here. Get rid of the castle. I think we know what castles look like. I think we're familiar with the concept. Though it was a silly thing I was saying when we were starting up. These fictions that we tell ourselves help contextualize the situation, right? If you think of the ridiculous things that the Roller Coaster Tycoon scenarios ask you to do, like Crazy Castle, for example, building a theme park, like in like a castle, that's ridiculous, right? But it gives you so many ideas. Suddenly we're like, oh, what sort of like castle puns can we do? And that helps drive the energy of the park forwards, helps make it unique, helps make it interesting. Otherwise, just having like a big like stretch of flat ground and going like, I had to build a theme park, you know, that like works for Forest Frontiers, but that's the very first scenario. We need to get to Pacific Pyramids where we're like defacing ancient architecture from civilizations long past. Like, that's purely criminal. So what we could say for this is that, you know, I think we might keep the idea that it was like a guy called Mr. Fundamental, right? Because it's not really a name, but for our purposes it is, in sort of like a sort of Looney Tunes sort of way. And it will help us think of a situation. So let's just say this guy is a rich guy. So let's say that Mr. Fundamental, he invented like a method of teaching that was like, you've got to teach the fundamentals first. And then all the children had to do this method. And he saw them all so bored in the classrooms, he thought he was doing a good thing. But then in his old age, he was like, I really need to give back to these kids. So what I'll do is I'll make an amusement park where they can all come and have fun. And see, there you go, there's a story. So Mr. Fundamental, he was a teacher, and he gave all his land, his family's castle that he'd built using all this money, and he said, let's make a theme park instead. I want to bring joy to the community. And there we go, we can use that fiction to inform the reality of the park. Hello, I've been messing around a little bit. I'm sorry I didn't include you on this, but this was a process that took quite a long time. So I'm glad I didn't record it, because it means that I didn't have to sift through it, and I didn't have to do the thing that I had to do with the earlier footage, which is basically throw it away because it was so boring. But the idea I was describing earlier, I thought I'd just muck around with that, with this scenic garden idea, and then it started developing a bit more. It's one thing to say, oh, it's a scenic garden, but it's a whole other thing to actually put pen to paper on that and start getting the ideas out. So it was a bit of a process making this happen, and I found this sort of one bit of advice that I think's really good. It is a sort of game of symmetry breaking symmetry, symmetry breaking symmetry, and we can see it here a little bit with, we've got symmetry here, but with the covers we didn't do it exactly the same, they're different on both sides. And then when we follow the symmetry this way, if we use this as our line of symmetry, this symmetry over here, the crazy paving leads down into this more scenic area, which is a very sort of like low intensity area, but still has lots of opportunities to express yourself. So this little fountain, I actually found it really hard to make this fountain with no hacks, because I didn't want for the walls to be too high, but all the walls that are small enough to use are kind of boring. So what I did, you can kind of see it here. I wonder if we could probably just delete them, right? I just pulled this surface down and placed the fence there. So you've got to be crafty in this game. You know that, guys. You've got to be crafty. You have to be crafty. So it gave like a nice symmetry here, and then I wanted to have this figure here, but I couldn't make it feel symmetrical coming from this way, so I thought, you know what? We'll do some desire paths as well. We'll have this as the main path, and then I feel like over time in the story of it, in the timeline, people kept walking down here, so they added this dirt path, and the same things were over here in between these little areas of path that you would have just ordinarily just walked over the grass to get to them. But these cobble areas are connected by the dirt path as well, and I've got a plan over here to make a little pavilion with some coffee in it, like a true rural British stately home sort of feeling, which is what I was going for here. If this area is like the crazy castle inspiration side of things, this part over here is definitely the evergreen gardens side of things, and developing this foliage took a little moment as well. It did take a minute to sort of get these rhythms going. I'm still not sold on these trees that are sunk in here, but it was nice to... I'm also not sold on the colour of the queue. There is a funny sort of balance issue here where this feels like it's a bit too skew-whiff this way, but I think it works to its benefit. That sort of broken symmetry to this like wider symmetry that's there is fun, and this idea that you are looking down from here as you're entering the park and looking down that way, or like across to here where it's a bit more high density. I feel like if we've got like a high density area like this, you want the reprieve of the low intensity area as well. So I think I'm gonna carry on developing this a bit more, and I think the last thing that I want to do this episode, if you guys are fine with it, is I want to experiment a bit with another roller coaster. All right. After watching that video, I realised that I'd pulled it in way too close along this angle, and don't you think that looks much better? I could even go further this way, you know. We've got up until this train track, certainly, and that train track isn't even set in stone. So maybe we should leave that flexible, and we should see how we feel about the area moving forward, but it feels less claustrophobic like that, doesn't it? Anyway, we made promises vis-a-vis roller coasters, didn't we? So let's have a look at this. I think I've allocated this area, as you should be able to tell by this very informative yellow dot. Let's grab the junior coaster. Now, there's a general principle with the density of rides that you don't want too many big ticket rides right next to each other, because it gets very claustrophobic very quickly. You want to like space them out. So I think heading over here and doing a smaller ride not only paces ourselves in terms of like the series, but also in terms of a level of density that's like welcome to the guests and doesn't overwhelm them. Now, when you're doing like a junior coaster, there's an instinct to do something that's kind of like that. And there's nothing that's like wrong with this per se. It's just not necessarily the most interesting thing in the world for us. And this is a completely acceptable ride. And not only is it acceptable, it's realistic as well, because you don't want something that's too intense for the little ones, right? They're only small, and this is potentially the very first ride, so maybe something like that. You don't really need the banked turns on a kiddie ride, and that would probably be an expense that's just a bit too much in the context of a children's ride, where you're wanting it to kind of be cheap, cheerful, straight down the middle. It doesn't need to be anything special, and nor should it be. But I think we can do something that's slightly more interesting than this, and maybe save this very low imagination version. And I don't mean that as like an insult. It's low imagination because it gets the appropriate level of imagination, which isn't all that much. But I thought it would be much more interesting for us to explore a kiddie coaster that's just that little bit more spicy. So let's see what we can come up with. So when we're building roller coasters, something that we are very commonly trying to hunt out is opportunity to interact with the environment, because that's one of the simplest things we can do to add excitement. So what I'm trying to do here is fish for a idea that is low intensity, so appropriate for children on the younger end. Maybe a bit older than the layout that we just did, because the appeal of that layout, that simple oval layout, is that there's no surprises there, so a younger person who perhaps might be intimidated by bigger rides can see that there's no danger, that it's purposefully not too thrilling, it doesn't go too quickly, all of these things. But I think we can push it a little bit and maybe break the mold a little bit and see if we can fish for something that's a bit more interesting. You know, I think we're onto something here that's going to both be simple but have that level of interest that we're looking for. So we're going to follow that thing that we were looking at here, but we're going to start modifying the ground. I think this is when everything changes. Now here's something interesting. If you try and raise up this land here, it won't work, but if we start with the land like that, it'll build over it. So if you're in that situation where you feel like something should work, try reversing the order of operations in which you're doing it, because that might just be the solution. I think I wanted to have a tunnel here, but I feel like it's just too cumbersome given the context, so let's try it. Yeah, I'm going to look at that more. Let's just modify this land to how it was. Can we go a bit more aggressive in this corner? No, we can't. Let's try our little technique that we discovered. Yes, we can. Look at that. I don't think we can grab this. We can. Oh my goodness. That's pretty cool. Wow, you can get really aggressive with that. Hey, I'm learning stuff right now. Every day's a school day. Now, something that we enthusiasts like to talk about is the brand and the make of the roller coaster, because that's something that really helps inform what decisions you can be making and lets you access new like layers of creativity from reality as like inspiration. But in terms of junior roller coasters like this, because the stresses on the ride are very low, because it's not going very quickly, and because they're very cheap to produce, there are simply too many brands to count. You can just go on the roller coaster database and look up Wacky Worm or Big Apple, and there will be as many production companies that can make these rides as there are grains of sand on all the beaches on all the world. So in that regard, it's actually kind of liberating, because you can kind of say, because these aren't that complicated to make, you could ask any company to do basically anything with it if you were so inclined. Now, technically speaking, you'd probably go with a more reputable company, because you'd have safety in mind. You don't want to be sued, all of those things. But all this is to say that a ride like this has more flexibility to it than just doing a Wacky Worm. And in that regard, it makes it fertile ground for creative decision making without any of the guilt that may come from breaking the mold in a realistic environment. So yeah, can you see what we're going for here? Can you see my vision? It's just that slight bit more interesting than a Wacky Worm, basically because we've pushed over the internal sort of figure eight of the Wacky Worm over to this side over here. And that in turn has freed the middle up for us to lead some path interaction through the center, which just makes it's so simple, but it's that bit more interesting. And I've spotted something over here. I've spotted an opportunity to do something pleasant. Now, don't forget, guys, you can press shift with paths now, and you can also press control. Is this too bulky? Perhaps so. Let's make this guy a knight, and he can be up there. So as you can see here, we've taken some opportunities to heighten the experience for the riders. A little bit of layer separation here, just to obscure one side from the other. Because I think the philosophy is going to be that the people on this side, and we could maybe even do something like this. make a little viewing platform here. That could be interesting, couldn't it? So here are the statistics for this junior roller coaster. It's nothing incredible, but it's appropriate for the task it's got to complete. You want the kids to be getting on this and leaving the ride thinking, I have to ride that again, or I have to find a bigger roller coaster to try next. That is the dream. Alright. You can see we've made a few changes here. The main thing that I did really with the coaster was I changed the colour because I felt like the colours were being pulled in a very dark direction, which is kind of the opposite of what you want from a kids area, to be honest, isn't it? You want it to be a more bright area, and when we compare it to like over here, it still feels quite dark over here compared to what it does over here, and I think that's because of the path, but I want to keep the brown path because of what I want for the area. I want for this area to be a sort of kids area. So I think in the spirit of what I've just said, I think I need to change this around a little bit. Maybe let's move this around just a smidgen, because we want for the queue to be connecting more to the brown path. So what we'll do is we'll kick out this path a little bit. There we go. Now we're discovering it in real time. So what we'll need to do here is just kick out this path here a little bit, maybe even we'll do it a bit more like that. That feels pretty good, doesn't it? And if we make this green and we always colour the underside of your paths, guys, that feels cool, doesn't it? And what this does is it gives us ample opportunity to have a bit of additional theming. See, look at that. It immediately feels much more bright, much more playful, much more appropriate, because it connects to this path here. So over here, you can see that we've started making a little plaza. Remember, guys, we're using paths to move people and plazas where we want people to stop, or where we might be a bit more appropriate to say where we're going to allow people to stop. Already we're using the plaza, we can use this notion of it being like a node from which we connect stuff. So we can imagine a node coming off this way and connecting to the path that's coming from this direction. Say if the path carries on like this, obviously this isn't set in stone because we probably won't want a big long stretch like this. It's just not all that charismatic, so we'll probably want to develop that a little bit more. But you get what we're swinging for. I've also planned to maybe put like a crooked house here and have it castle themed, and I've made a little box on top just so I can conceptualize the upper limit that we've got when it comes to theming this, because I think I want to cover this up completely. And it's quite big, so it might be quite dominating, so maybe we'll shelve that idea, but we're in this exploratory phase here, and that's the really valuable thing. We're just seeing what we feel like is going to work. So for this I was just imagining like a topsy-turvy castle sort of thing, a children's idea of like a wacky castle. I saw in this corner maybe we could put like a little shop here, and of course we have just got like a preliminary outline of where a queue line might go. This is by no means set in stone, just like everything else. Yes, this feels like a fun new development for this area. It's already given me lots of inspiration to think about. I also carried on developing this a little bit, and it feels really, really nice. That just feels so great as a little nestled area. It's got like a symmetry going around this way, where it's like a semicircle with the with this potential building over here and this merry-go-round feeling like a symmetry line going this way and this way, but also it has that symmetry from this direction, so we've got multiple layers of potential design inspiration. I dreamed up a novel solution to our too big problem. See, when things are too tall, what's the rule that we've always followed? We sink them into the ground, like this. It's really useful for not just when you're building in vanilla and you're not using any zero clearance cheats, but also when you're doing scenario play or anything where there's perhaps a visual element that's just a bit too tall. You can get around that. And now let's look where the height is. You know what? That is so much more manageable. Let's delete this top one. Look at that. That is so much more manageable. And we could even sink it even lower. Now that we've sunk it, we can sink it as low as we want. I think the last thing that we'll do in this episode is show off this little cafe that I've made. Now, if we look underground, we can see here that We've just got some shops buried with some like seating as well for the guests whilst they're in here. But I've used some land textures here to create much nicer canopies than with signs. Now I think I might do signs here perhaps. I'll just plop them down and we can see what we think. The colour's not quite right, is it? I'm still considering editing the ones near the entrance as well. Let's look at this. Colour's still a little bit wonky, isn't it? Now, I had initially wanted to create more conceptual symmetry with these colours here to this building here, but I felt like that would kind of go against the message that we've got of trying to build consistently in an area. So I thought I'll just do it in this classic style. Now I've put something that we haven't done so far, I don't think, is added like roof details, like chimneys and stuff like that. I thought if they're making stuff in here, there's got to be chimneys, isn't there? It started off as quite a symmetrical thing, but I've just developed it a little bit more by just dropping this canopy at the front down and allowing for this backside to be the dominant view as the guests can come out onto here and look out across this nice area, or people coming in can see it and think, oh, I've got to go and buy a brew over there. Got to get some coffee in me. And then what I wanted to do was just break the symmetry a little bit. So it's all about creating symmetry. So we've got this nice symmetry with this building here. And I've also done it here where it's not completely symmetrical along this line. One side's got a roof, the other side's not. And then over here, I've just added a little tumor of sorts, a little additional piece of the puzzle over here, which allows, and we can get rid of this as well because it's kind of doing the same job as there, which allows this to feel a bit more developed and interesting, and it also allows us to nestle a little bit more foliage in this corner here. And I've put a few little bits of rubble. It was quite tricky to put the details around the bottom here because if you put things where the supports are, it gets rid of the supports, and I wanted to keep the supports. So it might look a bit funny there, but I think it works really well within the boundaries that we've got. And I don't know what we're going to call this place. We'll probably just call it cafe for now. And because we've got an odd number of tiles here, I've just added in that Texas Giant sign to hopefully and persuade everybody that this is perhaps a logo for the cafe. And I think that's going to do us for today. I'm still not settled on the colours for this junior roller coaster. It's probably changed about 15 times throughout this video, but I'm still mucking around, seeing what I can do with it. If you're enjoying this series, something that could be really good is if you could just comment on the video. Comment just takes a few moments and it lets other people know that you're enjoying this video. And if you're enjoying it, of course, you're more than welcome to subscribe. I'm not going to sit here begging. I'm not one of those channels who's going to show you a graph of who's subscribed and who's not going to subscribe. Maybe that's what I'll turn into, but for right now, it's episode 3. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. But any engagement that you give is going to be really good for helping other people find this and other people joining our community. And I think anybody finding a place where they belong, like the people in this community, is always a good thing. So if you think that's a good thing as well, leave a like, leave a comment. If you'd like to, you can subscribe, but certainly, more than anything, go over to anydesigns.com, make yourself an account there, and start your journey to becoming an excellent member of our community. I'll see you in the next one.